the bike light. So bike light ortho, again, I emailed it to you this morning. If you want to download that and open this up. If you want your layout to look similar to mine, I believe if you go to Window, let's see, Workspace, and say Essentials Defaults, only do that if you don't have a set, if you don't care about your setup. But if you have a custom setup, so hopefully it looks similar to mine. Let's see, maybe I should go to Window, Window, Workspace, and Reset Essentials. There you go. Then maybe yours will look like mine. So quick recap, again, we already went over Photoshop earlier in the semester. These are your drawing tools on the left side. Over here, this is one of the most important things, your Layers tab. You can think about it as sheets of paper stacked on top of each other. It's a way to make edits. So for example, if I go down here, I need to minimize my window because otherwise I'll click on my recording icon. Oh no, I didn't want that to happen. Let's go to Reset Essentials. There we go. If you go down here and click on this, that creates a new layer. This is like all recap. I'm sure you all know this, but this way now when I draw and make a mess, it's on a different layer. I can turn it off. So it's a way to make edits and add things without writing over stuff. So the first thing we want to do, if you have your orthographic file open, maybe it's scanned in a funny way like mine. You could always go to Image, Adjustments, Image Rotation, 90 degrees counterclockwise in this instance. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And it will give us now a landscape page. Also, the way that I scanned this in, it just did the full scanner bed, which is bigger than 8.5 by 11. So you can always go to Image, Canvas Size, and type in exactly what you want here. So in this instance, 11 by 8.5. You'll notice that it does it about the center. So depending on where you click that, so if I click on this left box here, it means it's going to take 0.7 inches off the right side. If I do it here, it's going to take, well, I'm only shrinking it in width, but if I was also shrinking it in height, it would either move it up. So depending on where you click this dot is where it shrinks it. In this instance, it doesn't matter. It could be the center. I'm going to click on the left because I'm going to try and get rid of this gap on the right. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. It's going to say, hey, you're deleting out material or we're cropping. It's just verifying that you want to crop your page. So I hit proceed, and now we have an 8.5 by 11 sheet. This is incredibly important and incredibly basic, so some of you may be aware of this, but also some of you may overlook this. I remember the first time I used Photoshop for a project in school, I overlooked it, and my pages all came out pixelated. So just be aware when you're scanning your pages in to be aware of the dots per inch, the DPI. It's incredibly important. You can check it by going to Image and clicking on Image Size. And there may be different settings here, but you can drop this down to whatever you want it to be. So in this instance, it's inches. So if yours isn't, you can change it to that. But you can see here is the resolution. Most default scanners will probably scan in at 72 DPI. That's common for web-based applications or images that only exist digitally. If you want to print, really the suggested print size is 300 DPI. But you can get away with 200. It's a little bit lighter on file size because I emailed it to you. I did it at 200. Now, the way that DPI works, again, it says here pixels per inch. So it's the number of pixels in a square inch. So in this case, 200 pixels in a square inch. Obviously, the more pixels there are in a square inch, the more higher resolution your image will be. The less the human eye will be able to see dots. If there was 4 pixels per inch, you would have half-inch size pixels, which would look terrible. Does that make sense? I will take off points for pixelated images on Project 4. So if you want to use digital and move things around, absolutely make sure you're not smaller than 200 DPI. Now, it's also one of these things where if you start at 72, it scans in at 72, and you try to scale it up to 700, The computer makes up so when you bring it in from the real world to the digital world, if it's scanned in at 72 dpi, that's the only information the computer has. If you try to scale it up to 200 pixels per inch, the computer makes up those remaining pixels. It's not accurate. So you can never scale up DPI. You can, but it looks not good. Again, the computer makes it up. And to be honest, it's gotten better, but don't do that. You can always scale down. You can always get rid of information. You can't make up information. Is that clear? Okay, cool. All right. So does everyone have something in the right orientation that they're happy with, either mine or theirs? So a couple things. If it's a JPEG or something you scanned in, you'll notice over here in the Layers tab it says Background, and it's locked. If you double click on that, it converts it to a non-locked and a non-background layer. And you can go ahead and click OK. And so now it should say Layer 0. Hopefully that worked for everyone. If not, you could always say Control A. I'm trying to think. Macs don't have an Alt button. They have an Option button. But Mac should have a Control button. If you do Control A, that means it selects everything. And then if you do Control C and then Control V, it should paste a copy. So now, look, I have 2 layers here. So if for some reason you can't unlock your background, that's another workaround to create a workable layer. Another way to copy a layer real quick is for you Mac users is to hold down Option and select a layer and drag it up. And for you PC users, you hold down Alt and drag it up. I thought I had my key tracker loaded. I can try it real quick. This way you'll see when I press something on my keyboard. There you go. So for the recording, if you need to look what I'm holding down as I'm using hotkeys and stuff, it should show down here. Okay. So anyway, my goal was to create a copy. The reason for that is if I mess it up, then I still have the original. I can revert back to it. So you'll notice there's a lot of messiness here. There's the example of the marks I don't want you to make. I did a teacup example on the left. And then everyone is probably going to have these grid lines in the back. The easiest way to adjust this, or my recommended way to adjust this, is with levels. So again, if you've copied the layer, Photoshop is one of those programs where there's a billion different ways to do things. So I'll show you 2 ways to do this. 2 ways to work with levels. One way is to copy the layer, go to Image, Adjustments, and Levels, or it's Control L, I believe, for both Mac and PC. And that brings this up. And again, this is just a fancy dialed way to do contrast. It's just a little bit more of an in-depth contrast tool. We talked about it last time too. So if you take the slider on the right and drag it to the left, what it does is it increases the brightness. So by increasing the brightness, we get rid of the faint grid lines in the background. If we take the left slider and slide it to the right, it increases the darkness. So this, if you're pencil drawing, if you don't have a light hand, this will make the drawing marks you made darker. And if you just kind of keep smashing these towards the middle, you'll get something that where the contrast is completely blown out. So obviously we're looking for kind of a happy medium. The slider in the middle, I believe, leans it one way or the other. I'm sure it's a little bit more nuanced than that, but this is the level of my knowledge. Other ways you can adjust this. So again, I'm going to hit Control L. There are these eyedroppers on the left. If you take the one that's colored white and select a mark you don't want, drop it on the center of one of the grid marks, it'll take everything whatever you touch it to, it will set the adjustment automatically so that it's white. Same is true for black. So if I take the black dropper and I select my line work, it'll make my line work black. So it's kind of like a quick auto adjust. To me, it's a little heavy-handed. You can always start that way and then try and tweak it with the middle. If you want the TLDR, the most simple thing to do, I would just take the right slider and drag it to the left, and the left slider and drag it to the right, just so that they're towards the middle a bit more. And then when you're happy with it, you can click OK. But I promised I would show you 2 ways to work with levels. So that's one way, and that's perfectly acceptable. Another way is to actually create a levels layer. So that's, if you go down here, I believe it says half circle shape. and click on that, you'll notice levels is an option in that menu. If you click on that, what it does, you'll notice it drops a layer mask over here. So what this does is it's a level setting that applies to everything beneath this levels setting layer. So it would be the same adjustments, drag to the left and right. I can close that when I'm done. But now if I turn this eyeball off, the settings goes away. So this would be a way to like preserve, this is a way to apply levels without actually editing the image on the layer. So if we think of this like layer 1 as a sheet of paper, the first option I showed you modifies the sheet of paper. It's like you're actually like, we're not making a mark, but imagine it's like you're drawing the marker on the sheet of paper or erasing the sheet of paper to get rid of the lines. This second way is kind of like you're putting a thin film, transparent film over your paper that obscures the lines, but you can always remove the film later. There is no right or wrong way, it's just different paths to the same end goal. Any questions on levels? Am I going too slow, too fast? Okay. So let's see, either way works. I'm gonna go with the first way. So I'm just going to, I have a copied layer, I hit Control L. I'm now just dragging both of these in until it looks about good. It looks a little different on my screen than up there. Up on the projector, it's a little bit more blown out. All right, cool. So next up, you all can't see it. Maybe I should have adjusted my levels in such a way that you could still see it. But in my screen, I can still see the teacup. I'll do that just so that I guess you can barely see it. Oh, you can't even see my grid lines up here. Quick reminder that there is this history. You get it by clicking this icon up here. And this shows every command you've done up until this point, and it allows you to roll back. Control Z is undo, but it swaps back and forth. You can see that levels appears and disappears. Control Alt Z or Control Option Z is how you move step all the way back. All right. So let's see, since you can't see this stuff, I'll go this way and I'll make the levels in fact darker so you can see what I see. Well, let's imagine that the grid lines are gone. Okay. So this is adjusted for the projector. So there's still this cup here and this mark here. You can get rid of it any number of ways. You can go up to the eraser tool. The thing is with the eraser tool, whatever I erase, it'll just show what's behind there. So if you have another layer eyeball turned on, if I erase part of this, it will show what's behind there. So let me just give you an example. If I just quickly drop a color behind this and I take my eraser tool and I start to erase the teacup, it looks like I'm drawing in purple. And it's not that I'm drawing in purple, it's that there's a purple layer behind it, and so it's revealing that layer behind. If I turn all the eyeballs off behind it, it shows like a checkerboard pattern. The checkerboard pattern, once again, is Photoshop's way of saying, hey, that's a transparency. So that's one way to get rid of marks you don't want, is the eraser. Just some things on the eraser tool. If you click up here, you can change the settings. Hardness is whether the edge is blurry or not. It does a kind of a soft transparency. It's why if I turn this purple layer back on, it looks like it's kind of glowing or it's like fuzzy on the edge. If you change that hardness to very hard and I erase this mark on the top right here, you'll see this is the difference between hard and soft. Hard looks like this, soft looks like this. If you are erasing other aspects on your page, I would recommend using the soft eraser just so that it blends. Another thing you can do, and really the better thing to do, I would say is to use, it's a little bit more work, but it's to use this polygonal lasso tool. And this way, if you take the time to just kind of select out your drawing, that way if there's any other marks you missed, you don't need to worry about it. Reminder on like Photoshop navigation, the spacebar brings up the hand tool, which allows you to drag your canvas around if you're zoomed in. Spacebar plus control zooms you in. Spacebar plus control plus alt or option zooms you out. So if you're zoomed in and you hold down spacebar, this is how I can drag my canvas around. And this is how I work in Photoshop. Are there any questions so far? Yeah, okay, how do you erase with the lasso tool? So this is what I would recommend. I think this is the better way to work. So I would load the polygonal lasso tool. So I'm gonna convert to my corrected sheet here, which I realize on the projector doesn't look any different to you all. And I'm gonna zoom in. And with the polygonal lasso tool, it works when you click, it creates straight lines between where you click, right? And this is how I like to work. There is, for what it's worth, there is like this magic wand tool where you can click in a white space and it will select everything that's white. And if you have like clean lines, it won't select what's on the inside. That's like a quick way to work. If you like that, you can do that. So you can, again, it's this magic wand tool. You can click in a white space. You'll get this selection that's running around the edge. If you go to select and click on inverse or shift control I, it will select the opposite of the white. So if you clicked in the white space outside of your orthographic or outside of the lights, it selects everything but the lights. If you do shift control I, it'll select the lights themselves. You'll notice though that like you can see that there's some dotted lines here. That's because it's selecting the teacup. You can remove from your selection by using any of the selection tools. The quickest way to use it, the quickest way to remove from the selection is the rectangular marquee tool. So you can select this, and I believe if you hold down Alt or Option, it subtracts from your selection. So what I'm going to do, I'll zoom out, I'll hold down Alt, and I'll click and drag a big rectangle away from my light. And when I let go, it's going to deselect everything that's in this rectangle. So do you notice that those lines disappeared? For example, we have some dotted lines up here from that mark I made. Same thing, I can hold Alt, click and drag, and it deselects that. And you can just kind of work your way around doing this, deselecting anything that you don't want, you know, beyond your lights. So that's like a really quick way to do it, is to use that magic wand tool. You can continue working down that path if you would like, but hold off once you have your selection. Another way to work is to, and what I tend to default to is this polygonal lasso tool. It's a little bit more work, but it just kind of takes some of the guesswork out of it. And what I do is I just like roughly click around my objects. If you hold down Control, it completes the selection. So I select around the top light, I get to the top and I hold down Control, and there's like a little, I don't know if you can all see it, there's a little ball that appears right there. And if I click again, it will complete that selection. I promise I'm going to answer your question, Gabby. And now I have the top light selected. If you want to add to a selection, you hold down Shift. There should be a little plus that appears next to you. You can't see it really on the projector, but that little dot that appears in the bottom right of my icon, that's a little plus. So I can work my way around the next view. So this is kind of like a manual way. If the first way was an automatic way with the magic wand, the polygonal tool is a manual way. And again, this is just a way to like select around your images really quickly. Again, every time I start a new selection, I hold down Shift just to start it. Once it's started, you don't have to hold down Shift. And then again, Control to complete the selection. So now I have my 4 views selected. Again, if any of you followed the first option I showed you with the magic wand tool, that's cool too. The final thing I would do, if you did the magic wand tool, you might want to go to Select, Modify, and say Expand, and just expand your selection by like a couple pixels, maybe like let's say 5 pixels. and click OK. You can see with the way that I selected, I was pretty rough and stayed far away from the line work. Sometimes, like depending on the level of like cleanliness that I'm trying to hit for my work, I might actually take the time with the polygonal lasso tool and like go right around the edge of the line work. For this project, in this case, as long as your work's relatively clean, it doesn't matter. You can select loosely around here. So if you did that expansion, or if you selected broadly like I did, the last thing you would do is go to Select, Modify, and Feather. And what this does is it adds just a soft blurred edge, so that if I have any lines, like if I zoom in here, sorry, I'll come back to feather in a minute. If I don't feather and I copy this or delete this, this is going to be this line is just going to stop. If I go to Select, Modify, Feather, you can set a number here. Again, maybe it's like 5 pixels, 10 pixels. This is the number of pixels that you want it to fade and blur. What that will do is now this line here, when I copy it or delete the other space, it'll blur it. It'll give it a nice kind of feathered edge, a transparent edge. Yes, Ani. Feather is under Select, Modify, and Feather. Or Shift F6, apparently. If I just show you what it does too in my history, this becomes very evident if I'm zoomed out. So before the feather, maybe this is the best edge. Look at this sharp corner up here. I don't know if you can all see it. But after the feather, it kind of softens the selection a little bit. All the sharp edges become soft. Okay, now to finally answer your question, Gabby. Now that you have your feathered selection, you can do one of two things. You could either select the inverse and delete the canvas around the lights. So right now, the way that I've heard these referred to as marching ants, the way that the ants work is they select whatever is inside of them. So right now, this is saying, hey, the selection is the light. If I go to select and click inverse, ants appear around the edge of the paper. So now the inside becomes between the edge of the paper and this. Maybe to state it in a more clear way, if you see the dotted lines, the dashed lines marching around the edge of your canvas, it's selecting whatever is outside of the shape that you have on your canvas. If you don't see the dots on the edge of the canvas, it's whatever is on the inside of the shape. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, 2 paths to the same end goal here. Gabby asked, how can we delete using the selection tool? Is that right? So what I would do is I would select the outside of the shape and simply hit delete. And now you'll see the checkerboard pattern appears and we have just the clean images. Another way to do this, if I hit Control Z, would be to, oops, didn't mean to do that. Oh, Jesus. This is where it's good to have the tree here. The other way to do it is go back to our first selection where we didn't have the dots marching on the outside of the page and simply hit Control C and Control V. And that just pastes the images into a new layer. Again, same path to the same end goal. One of them deletes it, one of them copies it and pastes it into a new layer. Is everyone with me? Have I gone too fast? Are you bored out of your minds? Sorry to say yes. I don't know what the answer is though. Try and tell some jokes. I don't have any though. All right, so this is the goal. This is what we're trying to get to. Now, once you're at this place, you can start to rearrange things. So unfortunately, I planned poorly and my top view went off my page. So here I might drag my image down a bit. I could use my marquee tool, rectangular marquee tool to select the top image. I want to move it down, so I would go back here and select the move tool. It looks like this plus on the top of the tool button. And I can simply just click and drag this, and now it can move it on its own. But better yet, since I went through the trouble to align it on the page, I can click and hold Shift. And if you hold Shift, it will drag it only up and down. Or it depends on how you first drag it. If you click Shift and drag it left and right, it will only go left and right. But what I'm trying to do is just scooch it a little bit closer to the front view. And I'm going to do the same on the bottom. So again, marquee tool, select this. Selection tool, hold down Shift and drag, oops, Shift and drag up. It's not letting me. There we go. What I'm doing is I'm just scooching all my views just a little bit closer together. This is how you might tweak your spacing. And move that over. Anytime you need to get rid of a selection, a quick way to deselect is Control D. So if I have this selected, Control D gets rid of the selection. It gets rid of the ants. For those of you that did like larger drawings or may do larger drawings for your orthographic, the way you scale it is Control T. So ideally you would work all in the same scale. So for example, if you work all in full scale and you scan like 3 or 4 different sheets of your full scale drawing, once you have it all in one file, I would scale all the drawings together so that you don't have them end up being different sizes. So again, the way you scale is with Control T. It brings up this bounding box. I think we talked about this last time. Apparently the new fancy Photoshop automatically keeps the proportions. You don't have to hold shift. For some reason, I have to hold shift. I don't know if it's the settings or if I need to update. But obviously you want this scale, you want it to move, you want it to scale in proportion. So this is scaling in proportion. This is scaling not in proportion. Hopefully you all can see the difference, right? The light gets, it's like a funhouse mirror if you don't scale in proportion. So again, this is what you would do to get it to fit on one page. Again, my light and this demo, it fits on one page already. We don't have to worry about that. Are there any questions so far? Okay. Moving on. So of course we need a 6-view orthographic, and we only have 4 views here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to mirror my side view to get the other side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my rectangular marquee tool. I'm going to click and drag to select the side view. I'm going to hit Control C and Control V to copy and paste that. So now you should have a new layer above here. It's just a copy of this one. And then once you have that, you can go to Image, or sorry, let's see, Edit, Transform, and say Flip Horizontal. That means we're flipping, sorry, make sure you're on the right layer. So again, just to recap what I did. So we're on our layer here of our images. I select the marquee tool. I select the side image. And what I did is I copied and pasted it. So I simply went Control C and Control V. And you'll notice a new layer appeared here, layer 5. You want to make sure you're selected on that layer. Once you are, you go to Edit, Transform, and Flip Horizontal. And that's how you mirror the layer or the image over. Once again, I'm going to hold Shift to keep everything in alignment, and I'm going to click and drag to the left and space it just so it looks just about right, even to the right side. Now, obviously, this is a 6-view orthographic, and we only have 5 views here. We want to add a back view on either side. It doesn't matter where. It would just mean you would need to get the orientation correct. And let me think about this carefully here. Does that need to be flipped? It probably does. It does, no matter what, it needs to be flipped. All right, sorry. So yeah, it doesn't matter which side it goes on. I was just doing some mental calculation real quick. So what we're going to do is we're going to copy this front view because the back view is going to be the same silhouette. So once again, I'm going to go to my marquee tool. I'm going to drag this over the front view. Now you want to make sure that you're again right on the correct layer. So you want to click on the layer that has these 4 original views here. And once again, I'm going to hit Control C and then Control V. And then holding Shift, you can drag it to the left or the right. I'm going to go to the right with mine. This is where my back view is. But now keep in mind, the light is asymmetrical. It has this little nubbin on the right side. I want that nubbin to be on the other side. So once again, we go to image, or sorry, we go to edit, transform, and flip horizontal. Once again, making sure you're on the right layer, on the correct layer. Once you have all this set up, we have our 6 views. Obviously, there's still some errors that need to be adjusted, but right now what we're going to do is we want to position this properly on the page. So you should have 3 layers. You can select each of them by holding Control and clicking on each of them. And now when you move them, you'll move them all together. So I'm going to scooch them to the left a bit. This spacing here is a bit close, so I'm going to find this layer and move it to the right a bit. If you want to like double check your alignment, you can have rulers in Photoshop. If you have numbers on the top and the bottom of your canvas here, if you simply click in the numbers and drag down, you'll drag a ruler. And this is just a guideline. It won't print. It's not part of the drawing. It just helps you visually align things. If for some reason you don't have numbers above and to the left of your drawing, I believe we can figure that out by going to, I believe it's under View, and click on Rulers, and that may show it, or maybe show, it's somewhere here, I don't know. Yeah, it's Rulers. It's View and Rulers. And these, you can always click on these and drag them. I believe these are referred to as guides. So View, show guides. Yeah, we'll hide the rulers, show guides. So yeah, that's another way to align. So let's say you got your alignment off, you forgot to hold shift. That's another way to get that. Okay, one thing I forgot to mention, we should have done this before we did all this stuff, but I'll mention it now. Remember I mentioned that you really only need to draw half of your object. So let's say I really wanted this light to be symmetrical, or I'm not happy with how it turned out. You can always select half. Again, make sure you're on the right layer. Another way to make sure you're on the right layer is you can go to this tool here, the selection tool, and check this box at the top that says auto select. And now whatever I click on, it will auto select that layer. Look at this down here. And as I click on this image, it switches to that layer. If I click on this image, it switches to layer 3. And once again, you get to that by clicking the plus and checking the auto select box. So again, make sure you're on the right layer here. I just want to show you this. Again, if you want your symmetry to be perfect, I can select half of this light. And again, Control C, Control V, image, or edit, transform, flip horizontal. And now if I drag this and try and align it, I can get a perfectly symmetric light. The thing I would have you do if you want to try and get this perfect symmetry is take the soft eraser and erase part of it, or make sure it's soft. You can go up here and drag this all the way down to soft, or you can hold down Shift and the left square bracket. And if you erase this, you can start to kind of blend your line work together in a way that's more symmetric. But obviously, it has this little protrusion on the left side. We want to make sure we keep that in there. You don't need to go to that level of detail, but it doesn't hurt. It'll make your work look better if you have a symmetric object to like mirror half of it. It'll just look that much cleaner and tighter. Okay. Let's see. The final thing to do is to just kind of like correct the back view and the other side view so that they work. Right? There's extra lines. Remember, my advice was to draw the added lines, draw the more complex view. That way you can just erase. So one thing you could do is you could print this out as an underlay and use this to do a fresh drawing, which would honestly probably be best practice. But it's okay if you like working digitally and you'd rather just like clean it up in Photoshop. That's okay too. I don't mind. And that's what we'll do here now. So one thing I like to do in Photoshop is maintain my working layers so I don't accidentally like write over them, or if I need to revert, like come back and grab something later, that I maybe oversaw. So for example, that's why we kept the original here. If I needed the original, I still have it. So what we're going to do here, this would just be my personal workflow. I would probably make a new folder. You could call it like raw or arrangement or something. But all of these layers that we made, I would select all of them, again, either by holding Control and clicking on each of them. And then you can click and drag them into this group. If you missed how I created a group, it's just clicking on the folder here. It makes a new group. And this way we have all of these loose layers in this group. Again, this is just my workflow. What I would do next is I would hold down Alt and drag the group to copy everything there. I would right-click on that, and I would say Merge Group. And again, the whole reason for that is now I have one layer to work on, but I merged the group. I still have this original group here that's not merged. If for some reason I need to go back and work with the separated layers, I have that. Does anyone want me to go over that? I feel like I just did a lot of things really fast. Okay. So firstly, I'm going to drag this up. We don't need all this nonsense. I'm just going to say close this and drag this up so we can see my layers tab bigger. All right, so here I have my 4 layers, and I'm saying I like to group these into one layer. And a simple way to do that is to click on one, hold down Shift, click on another, right click and say merge, but don't do that. Because there's a chance that you want to, anytime you merge layers, like there's a chance you will want to have worked on them unmerged or individually. So sometimes I will, it makes the file size larger, but occasionally I will just put them into a folder. So the way I do that is going down here and clicking the folder to create a new group. I select all of my layers and I click and drag them into the group. I hold it over the group and let go. And now they're organized into a folder. And then what I do is I copy this by holding Alt and dragging. So now I have the same group twice. But what I do is I merge one into one layer. It just makes my working easier. I don't have to figure out what layer to be on, especially if you went through the trouble to do this like mirrored thing. Okay. The next thing we would do is just clean this up. So on this side view of the light, we don't see the hook. However, we see the rubber coming off of it. So you can do this any number of ways. You could, I don't know, take the eraser and erase what you don't want to see. That's probably the simplest thing to do. Again, because we copied the previous layer, I don't mind erasing this one because I'm not losing data. I still have it in group 1 here if I need to come back and get it. So I'm simply taking the eraser, I'm making sure it's soft, and I'm just clicking and erasing all of these inner lines here. That looks like the hook, basically. If you don't like this, like all of this grid pattern, sometimes what I'll do is I'll just create a new layer at the back here, and I'll select a white color. So again, you can select that either in the top here if you have the color swatch open, or you can click on either of these boxes here and make a white layer, or take a white color. And again, this is a new layer down here. Simply take the paint bucket tool and just drop a layer of white, and now it looks like a page. So now you can like more clearly see what you're working with. And here I can look at my objects. This is a smooth surface here. Hopefully this looks like a smooth surface. When I print this out, I would probably like clean up this line work with my pen a bit, just like smooth this out. So that's the right side view. The back, we can look at the back of the light. It basically just has a band across the top. This is basically smooth. So what I would do then is I would go back to this group here, take my eraser, zoom in, and just simply erase all of this detail in the middle, erase the light, and get rid of all of this stuff. You can quickly change brush size by using the left the square bracket tools. If you look at the bottom left of the screen down there, that's the button I'm pressing. So the close bracket makes it bigger. The start bracket makes it smaller. And if you hold down shift, it changes the hardness. So again, if I look at the back here, this would probably get erased. I would need to come in and draw a line across the back here. There would probably be a small ellipse on the top. Because because of this angled edge here, we would probably see a small ellipse up here. So the way this back view would look, I would have to complete it by hand in pen. I would draw a line across here, and I'd probably draw an ellipse up here. Some of this stuff might need to change. I guess this is slightly more advanced stuff. So for example, if you want to take this back line and make it bigger, this is once again where I'd use the polygonal lasso tool. I would select just this line here. Again, I'm looking at my light. You all can't see this because it's not up close for you, but this edge is a little bit closer to the edge on the back. So I can make this selection in here. I can hit Control T to change the proportions or the size, and I can just scale this line work up slightly. Unfortunately, the white here is going over my line, so I'm just going to trim this a little more carefully. I'm going to hit Alt to deselect. So again, just so I crop my selection a little bit tighter. Again, Control T, scale it up. This is slightly more advanced stuff. Again, just making that a little bit bigger. So I could now print this out, and I would just have a little bit more work to complete. I would have to complete the circle on the top here, because now I have it spaced better. I would have to complete this with a line here, an ellipse here, and maybe smooth this out. Make sense? So that is a way to use Photoshop to quickly arrange your orthographic view. Again, go to whatever level of fussiness you want. Some of this stuff I don't mind too much. I'm assuming you'll have some lines that was aligning it. If you do want to go best practice, I would say use this as an underlay and then do a fresh drawing on top and clean it up. And then it will also feel more consistent to the rest of your work. Don't forget to save. That's always important. And something I always forget. Cool. Any questions on anything? Yeah, Gabby. Okay. A text box comes up. Okay. I'll pause the video here.